All right, ladies and gentlemen, so this is your video for the lesson for Thursday and Friday. So I wanted to record it so that you guys had it and you could take and follow along with kind of the lead up and the setup to the Civil War and stuff like that. And I wanted to be able to talk about that so we didn't fall too far behind. And we had a chance to kind of look at it and talk about it and figure out why the Civil War happened, how it happened, and all of that. So if this will cooperate with me, there we go. So we talked about Harper's Ferry and how in 1859 you had John Brown raid Harper's Ferry, try to gain the arsenal, got control of the arsenal, and how he tried to get Southern slaves to rise up and create kind of a Southern slave revolt, and how that did not work. But at the end of the day, you had the North and the South really not trusting each other. And the North and the South really couldn't find common ground and middle ground anymore to be able to take and keep the country together. And kind of the breaking point, at least for the South, was the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. The South believed that Abraham Lincoln would end slavery, would prevent it from growing, and that is the one thing that they were not okay with, they were not happy with, they were not going to allow to happen. So once Lincoln is elected, South Carolina decides to secede from the Union or decides to break away from the United States and form its own country. And as soon as South Carolina does that, other states follow. So Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, Virginia, and Texas. So you can see this red line here, guys. This is the divider line between the North and the South. And there are 4 states that are part of, and let me move this up really quick. There are 4 states that are still part of the North that are slave states that did stay. Those 4 states are Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Maryland. Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Maryland. And these are states that still supported the Union but did have slaves. And the Union really, really worked hard to try to take and keep those 4 border states in the Union, especially Maryland, because Washington, D.C. is right on the border between Maryland and Virginia. And if you lose Maryland, then Washington, D.C. and the capital of the United States and the capital of the Union in the North is surrounded by Confederate states. And that's a huge problem and a major problem. So Lincoln and many of the Northern generals worked really, really hard to try to keep Maryland in the Union and prevent it from seceding from the United States. But those are the 4 border states. These are the Confederate states that secede from the Union and break away. So, let me do that. So we can see once again the same image, the same map with the border between the North or the Union and the South or the Confederate States of America. Okay, so now the South secedes from the United States. They form the Confederate States of America, and they elect Jefferson Davis as their president. Okay, Jefferson Davis is from Mississippi, and he becomes the president of the Confederate States of America. So Jefferson Davis is elected Confederate State president. And then the Confederate States of America are going to begin to confiscate Union lands, federal forts that are located in the southern states. So, for example, in South Carolina, there is a fort known as Fort Sumter where Union soldiers are staying and are holding the fort because it is considered United States property. So the Confederates try to confiscate the fort. The men in the fort refuse to leave, so the Confederate States of America fire on Fort Sumter, which is the start of the Civil War and what really kicks off the fighting between the North and the South. Okay, so that's how the Civil War officially starts. Now, Lincoln officially becomes president in 1861, and he outlined his plan for slavery in the war. The secession of the South is illegal, and if necessary, force would be used to preserve the Union. That's all he cares about at the start of the war. His main goal is to preserve the Union and keep the United States together. Okay? Now, the Anaconda Plan is really the plan that is created by General Winfield Scott, the hero of the Mexican-American War. And that is how Winfield Scott believes that the United States can win the war against the Confederacy. Excuse me. So the first goal is to surround the South by land and sea, to blockade it, to prevent supplies from getting into the South. You divide the Confederacy into two sections so that one section could not help the other. Okay? And you capture the capital of the Confederacy, which is Richmond, Virginia. And you destroy, and let me put this up here for right now, guys, and you destroy the rebel government and prevent it from ruling or making decisions, thereby ending their resistance and ending the fight that the Confederate States are putting up. So that's the plan. That's what you're trying to do if you are the North. Okay? So here are some images of what that is going to look like: the blockade on land, the blockade by sea. You're trying to choke out Jefferson Davies in the South to have their supplies run out so that they can no longer fight the war and they have a hard time fighting. Here is another great example of it, known as the Anaconda Plan. It was nicknamed the Great Snake, or Scott's Great Snake. So this is another cartoon that shows the plan, part of the plan of the Union and Abraham Lincoln and General Winfield Scott. Okay, so that's how they're starting the war. That's what they're thinking. That's what the Union is thinking, and how they're going to defeat the South and defeat the Confederates. Okay. So what we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to take a look at some of the battles that existed in the Civil War. Okay, guys?
Good afternoon.
Okay, guys, don't mind the announcements that just went off. So going back, we're going to take a look at some of the battles of the Civil War and kind of how the Civil War went and how who won which battles, and ultimately, hopefully, you'll have an idea of how the Civil War went, how it was fought, who were involved, and stuff like that. All right, guys, so that's the plan. You can ignore that slide, guys. If you would like, this is kind of a choose-your-own-adventure slide, set of Google Slides. So for certain questions, you can decide whether you would like to be considered a Union soldier or you would be considered a Confederate soldier. So you can pick one, and as we go through this, you can pick kind of which outcome for each battle and stuff like that you have, and kind of have a little fun with this. All right, what I would suggest now is that you open up the slides that I've posted in the digital day, or the live lesson for you, I'm sorry, and then you can take a look at the outcomes for those and read over the outcomes for each of those to see whether you survived the Civil War or not. Okay, guys? All right. So there's a lot that is involved when it comes to fighting in the Civil War between the North and the South. So you have a rifle. This is the first time that muskets or guns have rifled barrels in them, so the bullets are going to fly more accurately. They're going to be able to fly farther, and they're going to be able to kill more people because they are more accurate, and they can reach a target from up to 500 yards away. So it takes, the bullets can travel far further than they would have been able to, say, during the Revolutionary War. So technological advances are going to be major in the Civil War, guys. So just keep that in mind as you are going through this. The technological advances that happen as a result of the Civil War are going to be pretty huge and pretty major and have a huge impact on the Civil War. So what I would like you guys to go ahead and do is I want you to go ahead and I'd like you to click on this video. It's going to show you how long it takes to reload one of these rifles. This was not a quick process. This was a slow process that took people a while to do. If you could get off 4 shots in a minute, you were a very good rifleman and you were a very good soldier. That was the goal. That's what you were trying to hit. Okay? So the first battle of the Civil War is known as the Battle of Bull Run. It's an attempt by the Union Army to take out the Confederate Army near Manassas Creek, Virginia. And both sides, both the North and the South, hoped that it would be this one battle and the war would be over and they would win. What they're going to find out by the end of this is that this war is going to take much longer. It's going to take a lot more lives, and it is going to take and kill almost 600,000 Americans by the end of it. Okay, guys? This, now for obvious reasons, this is the deadliest war, most deadly war that America has ever fought, mainly because it's only Americans on both sides. So that's a big reason for why this is had the most casualties and stuff like that of any war we've ever fought. There's going to be about 600,000 men that are going to die from this war alone. All right? So this first battle is kind of interesting in the sense that people didn't realize that this was a real war, and you actually had spectators that rode out to Manassas with picnic baskets and champagnes to watch the fun little battle that was going to happen between the North and the South. And eventually they realized a lot of those people ended up being in danger because the battle didn't just stay in one area, and it wasn't a small battle that ended quickly and the war was over. Many of the Union spectators thought that the Confederates would just retreat and that would be the end of it. They thought nobody could defeat the Union. But when they realized that the Confederates weren't retreating, the spectators began to try to run away because they realized that a real battle was happening and they were in danger. And they actually made it harder for the Union soldiers and carriages to retreat, and made it easier for the Confederate soldiers to kind of take and, in a sense, take them out and dwindle the numbers of the Union Army as the Union was trying to retreat. So a lot of that had to do with the spectators and the fact that they were trying to retreat on the same roads that the Union Army was trying to. So the Union Army expected a victory. However, the Confederates surprised the Union with a rebel yell and a counterattack, which was led by Stonewall Jackson. Okay, guys? And this is exactly how Stonewall Jackson got his nickname, was by standing there like a stone wall and not retreating when the Union attacked in the first place. Okay, guys? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a minute to watch this video, a second to watch this video. So go ahead and watch this. This is kind of Civil War veterans practicing the rebel yell and giving you an example of what a rebel yell sounds like. So go ahead and watch that video and then come back to play this one and we'll continue on. Okay. So, all right. Please do not actually try your rebel yell, by the way. You're going to confuse the heck out of Mr. Hayes. Just listen to it, see how it sounds. When you get out of school today and tomorrow, then you can practice your rebel yell. How about that one, guys? Whoops, I didn't mean to go past that. The Union Army falls apart very quickly and retreats in embarrassment, and they realize that the war is going to take much, much longer than they realized. Okay, so the Confederate Army is able to defeat the Union Army in the Battle of Bull Run, and they are able to take the day, which is going to take and prove to the Union that this is going to be much more serious and take much longer than they thought it was ever going to. All right. So let's see what would have happened. So take a second. Actually, I'll do this and I'll read this over with you guys. But take a second. Pick, if you are a Union soldier, pick A or B. And if you are a Confederate soldier, pick C or D in your mind right now. Okay. So if you picked letter A, what happened to you after the Battle of Bull Run? What happened to you after the Battle of Bull Run was that you were scared by the rebel yell and you turned around and ran 60 miles back to Washington. Okay? If you chose letter B, as you were making your retreat, you watched as your captain was cut in two by a shell. Okay? So those are your two options for the Battle of Bull Run for the Union side. For the Confederate side, if you picked letter C, you made it through the battle successfully. Afterwards, you spent time writing to your sweetie, planning your wedding. And then if you picked letter D, you did your best rebel yell, scream, and sent those Yankees running. Okay? So great job. Great job. All right. So on the Union side, after the Battle of Bull Run, General McClellan decides that you and the other troops need more training. You catch whooping cough, but you recover. You take up the banjo to pass the time. You soon learn to play John Brown's Body. And here is actually a copy of the song John Brown's Body, talking about John Brown from Harper's Ferry. Okay? If you were on the Confederate side, with the Battle of Bull Run a success, you returned to camp to await the next orders from General Jackson. Lately, you've been spending more time grinding coffee with your bayonet than using it in battle. Okay, guys? So that's only the first battle of the Civil War. The real fighting is going to really take place as time goes on, because both the Union and the Confederacy thought this was going to be a short battle and a short war, but they realized it's going to be much tougher, much deadlier, and it's going to take a lot longer than they thought it was going to. All right? So, you don't have to write down your reaction to John Brown's body. We can skip that. So, from the winter of 1861 to July 1862, Lincoln is going to replace his first general, General McDowell, with General McClellan. Okay? McClellan is going to spend the winter between 1861 and 1862 training his troops. Lincoln wants McClellan to strike the Confederacy, but McClellan is very cautious, and that is going to be the characteristic of pretty much all of Lincoln's choices and Lincoln's appointments for the general of the Union Army until he gets to Ulysses S. Grant. Ulysses S. Grant is going to be as aggressive as Lincoln wanted his general to be, and he's going to be able to go toe-to-toe with Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, whereas McClellan gets beat pretty consistently by Robert E. Lee, with the exception of a couple of battles and a couple of mistakes that Robert E. Lee makes. McClellan is beat pretty consistently by Robert E. Lee. So, and Lincoln is going to replace him and find generals that are just as bad, if not worse, than McClellan, and hire him back throughout the war. And it's going to go like that for most of the war until the last year or two of the war, where Ulysses S. Grant is going to be made the general of the Army of the Potomac. And he is going to take and really lead in a way that Lincoln wants, and in a way that is going to challenge Robert E. Lee and make it possible for the Union to win the war. All right? But going back to this point, okay, General McClellan isn't going to use his army. I'd like to borrow it for a time. But marching and drilling and... Okay. So Lincoln becomes really frustrated with McClellan stalling and orders him to march to Richmond in July of 1862. Union troops almost were able to reach Richmond, but they were held up because McClellan thought that the Confederate forces outnumbered him, so he waited so that he could get reinforcements, when in reality, if he had attacked, he would have been able to take and possibly make it to Virginia and defeat the Confederacy and take the capital of Virginia. So while McClellan was waiting for reinforcements, General Robert E. Lee took that opportunity and attacked instead. Okay? He's able to beat McClellan in a series of battles, and McClellan retreats all the way back to Washington, D.C. These sets of battles were called the 7 Days battles. Okay? So let's see what happens. Obviously, the Union is defeated in the 7 Days battles, so let's see what happens once the 7 Days battles are over. So go ahead, pick an A or a B if you are a Union soldier. Pick a C or a D if you are a Confederate soldier. Okay, so if you picked A, you thought you lost your hearing in your left ear when a shell burst right next to your face. It seems to be coming back. That's a good thing. I'm glad none of you have gone deaf. That's a positive. Okay, if you picked letter B, you made it through without a scratch. You were called in to dress the wounds of the injured. Seeing the wounds of the soldiers has made you exhausted physically and emotionally. Hospitals at that time were not anything like the hospitals we have today, guys. They were very barbaric. You used saws to get through bones. There were amputations most of the time. There were no antibiotics or anything like that would prevent things from getting infected, prevent body parts from getting infected, and you might die from infection. So this is a very real thing, and we're going to see another slide on that. Okay? If you picked letter C, after the battle, you found a Yankee in a thicket who was still alive after being shot through the lungs. You found him a surgeon, but the doctor said that he would die and that he should not be moved. Okay? And if you picked letter D, you and your friends made it safely through the battle, but one of your friends succumbed to the drink afterwards. He fell out of a train car and broke his leg. Okay? So some of you have some good luck, some of you don't have some great luck. Okay. You don't have to worry about summarizing that, guys. You don't have that worksheet. That's okay. So after the battle, you help to bring the wounded to the battlefield hospitals. You're horrified by what you see. There is no anesthesia, so the wounded are screaming in pain. The surgeons are amputating limbs left and right, and they're just being thrown into a pile. There's blood everywhere on the surgeons' hands, on their aprons. It's just overwhelming. You're so shocked by what you see that you pass out. When you come to, you're in a hospital bed. You jump out of bed and exit the hospital as quickly as possible. You don't want to catch any of the diseases that are floating in the air. Twice as many soldiers died from disease during the Civil War as did from battle injuries. So more people died from disease after the battle than from the battle itself. Okay? And if you are a little squeamish, I would suggest looking down, guys, just so you know, because the image behind this might gross you out a little bit. So if you don't like it, look down, don't look at it, and then I'll let you know when you can look back up. Okay. So this is what it would look like. They would amputate limbs from people's bodies, and they would just pile them up where they could so that they were out of the way. And that is what medicine was like in the Civil War period in the 1860s. All right? Okay. So those of you that are squeamish, you can now look up. So we're not going to worry about the Battle of the Ironclads, guys. I'm going to pass through that. Okay? So there are two battles that are really, really important to know after the Battle of Bull Run and after McClellan trains up his men and Lincoln wants McClellan to attack. The first one is the Battle of Antietam. This is the first time that General Robert E. Lee is going to take the Confederate Army and march it north into Union territory. He knows that if he can do that, he might demoralize the North, and he might improve the chances of the South and the chances of the Confederacy for gaining supplies, and he might convince the British and the French to support the South in the Civil War. Okay, and if they can get allies, it's going to make the job of the Union putting down the rebellion of the South much harder. Okay, guys? So even though McClellan's troops outnumbered Lee's almost 2-1, McClellan is still cautious, and he does not take and bring in the reserves at key moments, and he is not aggressive enough to beat Robert E. Lee, who is a military genius and one of the positives that the South has in the Civil War. Okay? So now, despite McClellan's errors, the Union is going to still win the Battle of Antietam. Lee is going to retreat when he realizes he cannot win with his troop numbers. And after the Battle of Antietam, after the North almost loses the Battle of Antietam multiple times, Lincoln is going to finally fire McClellan and hire a different general. All right? Now, the Battle of Antietam is the single bloodiest day of the Civil War. Okay? That is the battle where the most men are going to die as a result of the Battle of Antietam. Sorry, guys. Let me just double check something. Yep, okay. So the largest number of men in a single day are going to die at the Battle of Antietam. So that is something to remember. That is something to keep track of. All right? Actually, this is the slide I think that I was looking for. There we go. The Union is going to suffer 12,400 casualties, and the Confederates are going to lose 10,000 casualties. So the Confederates lose 10,000 men, the Union lose 12,400, for a grand total in one day of 22,400 men. That's how many people are going to die as a result of the Battle of Antietam. It is the single bloodiest day of the war. Okay? So now let's see what happens if you are part of, let me see where can I put this. There we go, that works. what happens to you at the Battle of Antietam? So go ahead, pick A or B if you're a Union soldier, pick C or D if you are a Confederate. Okay. If you are a Union soldier, you were sent to, if you picked letter A, you were sent to search the fields for wounded soldiers. After the battle, you came upon the body of a young drummer boy lying in the grass, gone too soon. Okay? If you picked option B, you've been issued a new rifle. The breech loading rifle can hold up to 16 bullets at a time. This will make it much easier to shoot those darn Rebs. We can see technology advancing even during the Civil War. If you were a Confederate soldier and you picked option C, you injured your knee during the battle and it has now swollen to twice its size. You hope to leave the hospital with your legs intact. If you picked option D, you only survived the battle with only a scratch on your neck, but your shoes were stolen. So you got bad luck in the South. You got a pretty good luck in the North, obviously, because the North won that battle. All right? So after the Battle of Antietam, okay, Abraham Lincoln is going to begin to consider signing the Emancipation or creating the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay? And basically what that is going to do is it is going to free slaves in the Confederate States. Okay? So all states that are currently under Confederate control, those slave populations are freed. Now the hard part is that as far as the Confederacy is concerned, Abraham Lincoln has no say on what happens in the South. Okay? But what this does and why this is important is that it changes the focus of the war from preserving the Union to abolishing slavery and to ending slavery. And the advantage for Lincoln here is that Britain and France were considering joining the war on the side of the South, while the goal of the North was to preserve the Union, because Britain and France don't care if the United States is preserved or not. It is in their interest to end the war and have the South keep sending them cotton. But if the Union changes its goal for fighting the war from preserving the Union to ending slavery, now Britain and France look like they are fighting to preserve slavery, and that's not an image they want in the world. So as soon as Lincoln decides to change the goal of the war for the Union to ending slavery, that's when France and England no longer want any part of helping the South and fighting on the side of the South. Okay? And it was only because of the Battle of Antietam that Lincoln felt comfortable enough to issue the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. And he's planning on doing it, and he's going to do it on January 1st, 1863. All right? So that's that. So like I said, it changes the focus of the war to preserving the Union to ending slavery. The proclamation prevents Britain or France from entering the war on the side of the Confederacy. The Emancipation Proclamation will lead to African Americans joining the Union Army to fight, which will give the Union even more men. And the Emancipation Proclamation leads the way to the 13th Amendment ending slavery. Okay? So just so you guys know, just so you're aware. Last but not least, Lincoln saw the Emancipation Proclamation as his greatest achievement. Okay, perfect. July 1863. This is the official turning point of the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg. All right, guys? The Battle of Gettysburg is Lee's second attempt to attack the North. He brings 70,000 men with him, and he meets General Meade's Union Army in Pennsylvania near Gettysburg. Lee is hoping that he is going to be able to get supplies because by 1863, the Confederacy is running out of supplies thanks to the Union blockade. So Lee is hoping to supply his men and gain the upper hand. Now, the Battle of Gettysburg actually happened by accident because the Union and the Confederacy were close to each other. Neither side was planning on starting the battle at that point, but scouts from both the Union and the Confederacy saw each other in the middle of Gettysburg, and they began firing on each other, which resulted in the outbreak of the Battle of Gettysburg. Okay? Actually began by accident. went to a nearby town looking for shoes. They ran into some Union cavalry. Okay. At the day's end, the Union decided to retreat and wait for reinforcements. Reinforcements for both sides arrived that night. That was July 1st, 1863. Okay? On July 2nd, 1863, it is the most famous moment of day two. Okay? And the most famous moment of day two, I should say, is a charge by Union soldiers at Little Round Top. Whoever controlled that hill would dominate the battle. They charged Confederate soldiers and managed to maintain control of the hill. So what I want you guys to do, I want you to go ahead and watch that video. Take a minute, watch that video, and then we'll come back and we'll continue. Okay, perfect, guys. So we could see what that charge looked like, how important that charge was, and how much the Union knew they needed to take that hill, take Little Round Top, and then hold on to it and prevent the Confederates from pushing them off Little Round Top. Whoever owned the high ground really kind of controlled the battle and put themselves in a great position to actually win the battle. Okay? And the most famous day from day three, was July 3rd, 1863, was the military moment of the war. Took place on the third day. The most famous military moment of the war took place on the third day. It's known as Pickets Charge, where George Pickett's cavalry charges the Union and ends up being pushed back and defeated. But Pickets Charge is the most famous military action of the Civil War. Okay? And let me bring this down. Oops. Sorry, guys. Give me a second. This is just being temperamental. There we go. That should be good enough. Lee made the decision for his men to attack a Union position near a place called Cemetery Ridge. This may be related to the fact that he was frustrated by day two. He thought the Union line was weakest at this point. It was a bad idea because the Confederates would have to cross almost a mile of open ground and would surely be shot down by Union soldiers. That's why it didn't work. That's why it ultimately failed. All right? Okay. Okay, there we go. The troops were led by George Pickett. Not surprisingly, they were cut down while they were in the open field. Those who survived had to retreat back to the field, moving past their fellow comrades who were dead or wounded. The Battle of Gettysburg was over. The Union won the Battle of Gettysburg. Prior to that, it kind of looked like the South had the upper hand in the Civil War, but after the Battle of Gettysburg, that's it. The South has no chance of winning the war. The North is going to win the war. And that is the official turning point of the Civil War, is the Battle of Gettysburg. Altogether, there were 46,000 casualties, 8,000 men were killed, and the rest were wounded. Okay? By the end of the charge, 6,000 Confederates were dead or wounded. This was the bloodiest battle in the Civil War. The Battle of Gettysburg was the bloodiest battle in the Civil War. Okay? Actually, let me put this back up here real quick, guys. Hang on. Go right there for now. Now we can see this photograph showing Union and Confederate veterans of the Battle of Gettysburg meeting at a wall at Gettysburg, kind of greeting each other, talking with each other in 1938, many years later. All right? So let's see what happened to you at the Battle of Gettysburg. Go ahead and pick A or B. You're a Union, Confederate, C or D. Okay. So let's see. Letter A. After the battle, you found that someone stole your medicine, your comb, and the lock of your lady's hair. Okay? Maybe a little creepy, maybe just a little bit. Okay, option B. A friend of yours was blinded on the battlefield by being shot behind the eyes. He's otherwise fine, but he can no longer see you. If you were a Confederate soldier, you picked option C. You were wounded in the hand during the battle, but you've been patched up and will stay with your command. And option D. You made it through the battle with all your limbs intact. You have a new bottle of brandy that was sent by relatives, and you're trying to hold on to it until Christmas. All right. So after the Battle of Gettysburg, your regiment is battered, bruised, and broken. Lee gave the troops a speech which was ringing through your head. It was all my fault this time. Form your ranks again. When you get back to cover, we want all good men to hold together now. You were a Union soldier. Days after the Battle of Gettysburg, your regiment is sent to New York City. Apparently, the war is not very popular among these city folk, and they've taken to rioting to avoid joining the fight. You're injured when a rock from a protester hits you in the head. So, some luck for some not so much luck for others. All right. So at this point, Abraham Lincoln is trying to commemorate the Battle of Gettysburg, and he gives the Gettysburg Address. He's invited to give this address to commemorate a memorial for the burial of the soldiers who have died. Lincoln was unpopular at the time. His speech is remembered as one of the best in American history. You can go back and watch that later, guys, if you'd like to watch that. Lincoln's speech is some 300 words. It lasts for about 2 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, and then it's done. Many thought he would give a speech for hours. He gives a speech for minutes and then sits down because he's trying to not take away from the moment and keep Union morale up and trying to motivate the Union soldiers to keep fighting. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So that wraps up what I wanted to talk about today and what I wanted to cover today. If there's still time left in class and you have other work that you want to work on, you can go ahead and do that, guys. Otherwise, have a fantastically awesome day. Have a great weekend, guys, and I will see you guys next week. We'll finish up the Civil War. Have a great day, guys.